Looks like, but I have like a mouse pump show. It's already on. Good morning, welcome to the West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board West Rad meeting. Today is August 6th at 7:30 bright and early. Welcome everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy summer. Yeah.
I'll call over John Hannah. Yeah, here. Jeremy Mackay. Mr. Wimp, he will join virtually. Ashley Morey. Here. Thomas Crozier here. Zachary Fisher. Here. Douglas Meltzer. Here. Samantha Ross.
Here.
Greg Shaw. Here. David Bryson. Here.
Approval of agenda, motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Favor.
Aye.
Discussion. Then we've got agenda number 3, approval of the meeting minutes dated for June 4th, which was a lifetime ago. 25. All in favor?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Moving forward, any public comment? No public comment. No action, got an action item, election of chair and vice chair, and that would be Mr. Manford.
Okay, so again, the last page of your packet, there's a nominating for chair, vice chair. So if you want to nominate a chair, if there's more than one nomination, then we'll do a vote on the chair. And we'll move on to the vice chair, same thing. If there's a nomination for chair and no other nomination, then we'll just move to nominate the vice chair and vote both once. So is there a nomination for the chair?
Samantha has a nomination.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Ashley Morey.
So Ashley Morey has been nominated to be the chair. Is there another nomination for the chair? Okay, so the vice chair.
I can nominate
Nomination. Right.
Actually, let me think about this. I'd like to nominate Zach Fisher. Vice.
A nomination for Zachary Fisher. Is there a second nomination for vice chair? Okay, so we have Ashley for the chair and Zachary for the vice chair. So we need to vote. So all in favor
All
of
in favor, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
doing both at once? What's that? Yeah, let's do both once. Because there weren't a competing nominations.
So all in favor of Ashley Morey of chair and Zachary Fisher vice chair? Aye. Done.
Ashley's up front.
Congratulations. You're so good. That is exciting.
Or you can stay there, wherever you want to do. Sure, you can come here.
So we were on
You can face the camera.
Six. Zachary, would like to go back to the-
I thought it was funny that I got moved down.
You're spongy.
I'll tell you.
Move on now.
Oh, first.
In the first. That means that
Yeah.
welcome new chair, vice chair. You have it around the clock. So Samantha has turned out, but she can stay on. She's downtown presenting until that one gets filled. Or like John, he's been volunteering. He could apply again now because it's been longer than a year. So if you want to just join back up, you can.
I've been here for almost a decade, so I'm close.
Light fixture.
Yeah, what's that?
He's a light fixture.
Yeah, exactly.
So next, it's item number 6. We have Brian here to present. Was
Okay, Brian, the
loose.
loose.
Am I up?
Yes. Hello.
Oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Brian Luce. I'm an assistant city attorney, and I'm going to spend a few minutes today talking with you all about public meetings, public records, and ethical considerations now that you are on a city board. We're going to start with public meetings. The purpose of them and really our form of government here in Oregon is, to ensure that the public, members of the public, are aware of the deliberations, decisions, and how ultimately a board acts, but that those deliberations and decisions need to be governed and arrived at openly. So essentially, members of the public have to be aware and made available to public meetings so that they can see how decisions are made. The policy and purpose of public meetings, that governing bodies and decisions are made and discussions are open to the public. We don't want to have, meetings that, public, are unaware of, or they can't participate or see. The public has to know when a meeting's going to take place, the time, and it has to be accessible to all. Well, what is a public meeting? If you're hanging out with somebody, is that considered a public meeting? Public meetings apply to a governing body, which would be you all, or the city council, the public body for which a quorum is required, which is a certain number of members that must be present for for actions to be taken, and they must deliberate and make decisions of that matter. The public body, which is the broader thing, which is the city or county or a subdivision of the state. In this case, West Rab is a advisory board to the city council. The public body is the larger entity, and the governing body is the city council, but you are also a governing body and an advisory board to the city council. Who's subject to this law? Public meetings laws. A governing body means any two or more members of a public body that have the authority to make a decision or a recommendation to a public body on policy or administration. Two or more members really depends on how the board is been created. In this instance, a quorum is more than two, but in certain circumstances, that quorum could be made smaller depending on the nature of the instance. Governing body for the city includes not only council, but all boards and commissions, such as you all. But what meetings are subject to these laws? A meeting is the convening of a governing body for which a quorum is required. That's why, we take roll call at the beginning to ensure that we have the sufficient number of members to take action and deliberate toward a decision on any matter. Public meeting law applies to a meeting even if the sole purpose of that meeting is just to gather information. A work session. You have council work sessions, which they're not going to make any decisions. However, they are going to gather information, learn information, but they're not going to take final action. But that's still considered a public meeting. So a governing body doesn't have to make a final decision or recommendation for it to be considered a public meeting. What's not a public meeting? Well, you have a less than a quorum, so you don't meet the minimum requirements to hold a meeting. But then there's some other things we'll talk a little bit more. So social gatherings. And then if you all were to go look at a particular piece of property or a building, for an inspection, it's not a public meeting because you're not going to deliberate. You're not going to make a final decision, but you are going to gather information. Some of the pitfalls when you have a public meeting, I mean, this is the easier situation. You've got a properly noticed meeting. You've met a quorum, and it's open to the public. Any member of the public can walk in right now. But there are some problems when you're outside this, this conference room that's been properly noticed. Issues that can come up, telephone conference calls or electronic communications can be a public meeting. We're doing a hybrid Zoom meeting here. If the entire meeting was held on Zoom, that could still be considered a public meeting. An issue that happened a few years ago in Lane County involving a board. They violated the public meetings because they did it via serial meetings. What a serial meeting would be is if one board member went in and chatted with another, and then went and chatted with a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. So they were conducting business individually, lining up, but it wasn't properly noticed. It wasn't held open to the public. And there wasn't a quorum of members at this, at all participating at once. It was individual actions taken. They were trying to avoid a public meeting. Congratulations to all of you. You're all public officials, and even if you're not paid, you're a public official, and it includes responsibilities and some, there's actually liability for individual members should you violate the public meeting laws. In the Dundee versus Handy case about 14 years ago, they violated the public meetings because it's the members went and essentially shopped from office to office to see how everyone felt on a particular decision. Ultimately, the individual members were found to have personal liability. $20,000 is what it ended up being, and the county had to pay $350,000 in liability. As a public official, it's personal liability. The city's not going to cover you, the county's not going to cover you, the state's not going to cover you. So you want to make sure that you're participating in these public meetings in a fashion that's consistent with public meetings law. In the Dundee case, they were hit pretty hard by the ethics commission because they were lawyers. They knew about the public meetings laws, and they were trying to avoid holding a public meeting. So they were found personally liable. You can also violate the public meetings law by using email. And that's how they had a second violation. Same folks were found liable for a second violation. If you send an email to someone and they forward it to the next board member and forward it to a third board member and a fourth and a fifth, you can see how you're not holding a public meeting that's open and available. You're using a serial or one at a time type of meeting to avoid participation with the public. Well, serial meetings violate because you're not going to have a quorum there. It's one-on-one. You're deliberating, or hey, what do you feel about this particular decision? It was not public, it was done privately. And again, the Lane County Board, they were well aware of the public records laws, public meetings laws. One of them was an attorney who had actually given advice previously on public meetings, and knew or should have known better that emails and serial meetings are not allowed. They should be conducted with a quorum of the members that's properly noticed and open to the public. Now, when Tori sends you an email or Melissa sends you an email about your availability, or, can we hold a meeting in the morning, or can we move it to a different date? Those are administrative emails. They're not deliberations. They're not discussions of a board action. They're purely administrative. So, we're okay with responding. You're okay with responding to those type of emails. After they were found $20,000 liable, the Lane County Board violated the public meetings law a second time because they were replying via emails doing deliberations. In this second instance, they were found liable for violating the public meetings law, but they were not held financially liable because it was more of an error, and they were educated that you can't deliberate via email and it has to be done at a public meeting. Here's where I grab my phone. I don't have my phone handy, but remember, when you have your phone, it's both a luxury, but it's also a dangerous item. Yeah, you can use your phone. You can, if you text another board member or multiple board members, you can email from your phone. Be careful that you're not inadvertently violating the public meetings laws by, utilizing email or text. Hey, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this action? Or should we talk about this at the next board meeting? So you have to be very careful that you don't use your phone and inadvertently violate the public meetings laws. So be cognizant of email and texting or WhatsApp or any of these new technologies that allow you to communicate with another board member. Essentially, don't, if it's involving board business, unless it's administrative, are you available for this day? But you want to limit those communications to Tori and Melissa to ensure that you're not going to inadvertently violate the public meetings laws. The next part of, public laws is public records laws. When you send an email, send a text, anything along those lines, write notes on for a meeting, those are all public records. And the purpose of public records is to maintain a record of actions, deliberations, decisions that are made by a public body. And we have an obligation so that the members of the public can see those public records, and we have an obligation to maintain those public records so that we can show how things were done, what did we use to make a decision. They're prepared owned. There's an Oregon law requires us to maintain records for certain periods of time, and we have to maintain those so that the members of the public can view those. So be cognizant if you're creating a public record, even on your own personal phone, you have an obligation to maintain it, because it could be subpoenaed, it could be part of a public records request or part of a court action. So you can't create a public record and then just delete it because you don't feel like maintaining it. We have an obligation to make sure we keep those records appropriately. If you're sending an email to Tori, Tori's going to maintain that public record. If you're deliberating with him, hey, are we available on this date? If Tori's got a copy of it, we'll have those public records. So if you've got things on your phone, you got to make sure that you want to forward that to Tori so that Tori can maintain it rather than having to deal with, hey, can we see your phone? Because it does come up on occasion. It actually came up this past year. I think it's currently going on in Gresham, where there's an accusation that the mayor of Gresham was texting out into virtual world during a meeting about a decision that they were making. Those texts are public records because a public official was creating records about deliberations that were ongoing at the time. And, the Gresham mayor doesn't want to give up up her phone because it's, you got personal information on your phone as well. So be very careful when you're using your personal devices, because you don't want to get in a situation where it gets subpoenaed or IT is going to have to take a mirror or copy it all so a judge or a lawyer can look through it all. So be very careful of your personal devices when you are conducting city business. Congratulations, as I said earlier, you're a public official. There's three things we're going to talk about: conflict of interest, gifts, and your office. Well, there are ethics laws for public officials that you individually have to follow. But they also apply to your family members and your businesses if you happen to have one. It applies to your relatives. It applies to gifts or member of the public official's household and a business that you may have an affiliation with. And there's some caveats with that. We'll get to those. Public official means elected officials, like city council. We go out and elect those. You all are appointed officials. Public ethics apply to Tori and I, and they also apply to our agents. So if we contract, the city contracts with an entity, they are also subject to the ethics laws. You're a public official even if you don't get paid. Well, what's a business mean? If ethics apply to my business, what does it mean? Well, a private business, corporate, if you have a corporation, franchise, you're self-employed, it doesn't apply if you're a 501c3 corporation or 501c corporation. If you're only a member of the board and if you don't receive any payment for sitting on that board. If you get paid to be on that board, well, then the ethics would apply, and that business or that 501c would have to follow the ethics rules of both the city and the state. Well, there's two sets of ethics rules that you'll have to follow. The states are, well, let's just say the cities are more strict than the states. So if you're following city ethics laws, you're also following state laws. But if you're just looking at state, we're more strict here in Salem than the state provides. We've got a couple of rules we're going to talk about, the ones that come up most. Do you have a conflict of interest? You've got an appearance of impropriety, special favors, and then you may come across information, private information or city business that would not be something that you could disclose. You'd have to maintain it as private for the city for the purposes for which it was provided to you. Well, I've got a business that owns a parcel of property and the city's looking at buying it. Well, what would you do in that situation if you're a board member and, this rare but possible situation would come up? Well, you'd have to declare an actual conflict of interest, because if your business owned a parcel of property that the city's looking at buying and Wes Rab was going to recommend to council that we maybe explore this and you're a board member, well, if you would receive the state laws would be if you'd receive any private pecuniary benefit or detriment, financial, either you, your business, or a member of your household. So state law looks at, a financial benefit, but in the city, we're more restrictive. It could be any benefit or detriment that creates a conflict, not only financial. So if it benefits your business in a non-financial way, it still would be an actual conflict of interest. If you have an actual conflict of interest, your business owns a piece of property, you'll have to, at the beginning of a meeting, you'd say, I've got a conflict of interest. You declare what that conflict of interest is. Hey, this board's looking at making a recommendation for this parcel of property. I own this piece of property, or my business owns this, or your spouse does, or your, family member. You declare it, but then you would not participate in that portion of the meeting because there's an actual conflict of interest. But what happens if it's a little grayer than that? You're not quite sure. You have the piece of property next door to where the city is looking to purchase or entering some sort of transaction. But it's not so black and white. It's a little gray. Would you receive any benefit? Well, if there's a giant box store is being built on that property, maybe your property values go up. Maybe in the future, someone's going to look to expand and purchase your property, but it's speculative. In that instance, if you got an actual conflict of interest, you have to sit out. But if there's a potential, you would disclose, because it is this gray area. Hey, I own the property next door. It's not directly affected. It may or may not provide some benefit to my family. So I'm going to declare it. But depending on the nature of it, you still may be able to participate. What the city's laws are more strict than Oregon is we have an ethical obligation that we don't want to have an appearance of impropriety. We don't want decisions or public officials participating where it just doesn't look right. If it doesn't look right, you kind of want to, you actually do want to just say, hey, I've got a potential conflict of interest. We want to disclose it so the public isn't scratching their head going, well, this doesn't look right. Why is that board member participating in this? If you declared I've got a potential conflict of interest, we've put it out there, there's no question to it, and the public is aware that there's, there may be potentially in the future, but not a direct benefit. We disclose it so the members of the public are aware of it, and then you can continue to participate without violating an appearance of impropriety. Public officials are bound to observe in their official acts the highest standards of morality and discharge faithfully the duties of their office, regardless of personal consideration. Their conduct is in both their official and private affairs should be above reproach. We want City of Salem public officials to be squeaky clean, essentially. We don't want to have situations where the members of the public are saying, well, it looks like this board member is going to receive this big benefit, has never declared it, never said anything about it, and it just doesn't look right. We err on the side of disclosure and bringing things out for members of the public to see so that there are no questions. It doesn't look like there's an appearance of impropriety if a board member discloses and lets the members of the public know. You also have to engage in fair and impartial fulfillment of your duties. You can't contact counselors to get preferential consideration because of your position as a board member. You can't use city-owned property for private use, so you can't hold a party after this meeting. No public official shall grant any special privilege to any citizen which is beyond which is available. So you can't use your position on a board to favor one member of the public or another. You can't have your buddy X, Y, and Z say, hey, you know, what about buying this piece of property? You're on the board. You could recommend it to council. You can't engage in those type of activities. Sometimes on occasion, you'll be given confidential information. If there's a real estate transaction that may be coming up, you may be privy to some private information that will ultimately become public later, but it has to be maintained privately. You can't disclose confidential city information without legal authority. And you can't use that confidential information for private benefit of yourself or others. So if you know that the city is considering purchasing a piece of land, you know it because you've been provided a report or something along those lines, you can't contact that landowner and say, hey, the city's thinking about buying it. Maybe you should raise the price. That's improper use of confidential information. If you violate ethics laws, public records laws, or your position on the board, state provides there could be a civil penalty, like in the Lane case, they essentially intentionally violated the public meetings law by conducting serial meetings. You could forfeit any financial benefit that you would have received, and you can be sanctioned as well. The city provides that not only you could be financially liable, but you could be removed from office. And Section 62 of our charter, the reviewing authority, which would be city council, has the authority to act accordingly based on the nature of any particular violation. Chapter 62 of the charter applies to elected and appointed officials. If you receive a gift as a result of your membership on the board, you'd have to disclose it, any relationships you would have, and you would have to recuse yourself if, excuse me, if a gift, relationship, or contribution creates the appearance of impropriety in the mind of a reasonable person. So if you're receiving tickets, which you shouldn't get, but if you receive tickets to a football game as a result of your membership on the board, or if there's some action that's taking up, you'd have to recuse yourself. And there are gift limits that public officials and employees, usually it's the de minimis, like $15. If someone gives you a pen, that's fine. If they're buying you lunch, that's probably not okay. We don't want to have the appearance of impropriety of people providing gifts to public officials. And then it looks like to the average member of the public, maybe there's some favoritism there. So we want to avoid all of that. Ethical responsibilities are for the public officials is something you have to deal with yourself. It's a personal responsibility. In the Dundee case in 2011 for Lane County, the board members asked the city attorney to draft up a memo asking whether what they were doing was a violation or not. That city attorney wrote a memo that said, no, these are not serial violations. However, the Oregon Ethics Commission did not, an opinion from the city attorney will not protect you. You can, if you have questions about, an ethical situation, the Oregon Government Ethical Council can provide you guidance on that, but short of a written decision from that commission, oral advice from lawyers, that will not protect you. You have to make individual decisions on your ethical considerations. So you can ask somebody, hey, do you think this is a conflict of interest? They can provide you advice. However, the ultimate decision is on you. The role of the city attorney's office is our client is a city. We don't represent you in your individual official capacity. You can't rely on legal advice from me on ethics questions. We can guide you through the process, point you to where you can get information on if you have an ethical problem, but you can't rely on us. Where do you go for ethics advice? Oregon Government Ethics Commission, like a city attorney memo, informal advice from them doesn't give you cover. A staff advisory opinion. So if they give you an email back, that looks good. I don't think that's an ethical problem. That still ultimately will not protect you. You'd have to get a commission opinion, which doesn't come out very often. But that will provide, they are the regulatory agency. And if the regulatory agency's official decision is that's not a conflict of interest, or that's not a violation of, your ethics rules, then you've got cover. Anything short of that, and it doesn't protect you. There are new OGEC training requirements for public officials, and there's some new rules out regarding serial meetings. There's an ongoing change that's currently happening. More information. They're holding a OGEC meeting. I think it's next Friday. They came out with frequently asked questions that have really narrowed what a board can do, but there's a whole lot of questions coming up. So next year's meeting is going to have a lot of new information as these new rules roll out. So you'll want to make sure that you're paying attention to ethical considerations for the next year. If something big comes up, I'll come back and brief the board to ensure that we don't have any problems here at the city of Salem. Where do you go if you have an ethics problem? Well, we have a hearing officer that the city works with. They receive and initiate ethics complaint. They will hear and investigate ethics complaint, and they will render advisory opinions should one be necessary. If you have an ethical issue that you think may be a problem, we can point you in the right direction where you can go. You can let Corey know, hey, I think I've got an ethical problem. He'll bump it up to me or Dan, the city attorney, and we can point you in the right direction on where you can get advice. So if you have a question or you think it may be, I'd caution. I would fall on the side of caution and make sure you're looking at it from a big picture. You don't want to get in a situation where there's an appearance of an ethical issue and you haven't reached out. We can point you in the right direction, and ensure that you're I've got an actual conflict or I've got a potential conflict. If there's a question, always fall on the side of a caution. That's the safest route. How do I stop sharing here in slideshow? How do I stop sharing here, Tori?
There should be like a red box or like something that says sharing.
Share.
Side.
Oh, you stopped it for me? Thank you. Technology is not my big thing, so I try not to use and certainly don't use my personal devices for any official business. Do you all have any questions or thoughts that I could answer? No? Like I said, if you have any ethics questions, public meeting questions, or public records questions, feel free to reach out and we can get you pointed in the right direction so that we can continue to be open to the public with our deliberations and decisions made so that the public can review them and ensure that we are not conducting business behind closed doors. Anything else, Tori?
Things good.
Thanks, y'all.
So not necessarily tied to ethics of government, but just more that's common when we started. This is the new fiscal year, so that's why we did the chair, vice chair. city operates as far as fiscal year, basically July to July. So it's the first meeting. I just wanted to share as far as information on how this board operates and what your role is on our city website. You can either Google it or you can go on to Salem.net and search there. I would say we're doing some updates to the website. Hopefully the search function is a little better. I used to see the website a lot, and sometimes you have to be really specific, and if you don't do that specificity right, you're not finding what you're looking for. Or it might be buried down further, so you might have to toggle through a few pages to get. So in this case, when I get on the city website, when it says what are you looking for, I put on there Salem renewal. It's probably the hit down the page, and that brings you to basically synopsis of what it means as far as urban renewal. So the purpose of the urban renewal area, the maximum indebtedness, basically what it is property tax growth since 2001 is retained for the purposes of projects in the West Salem area. And so if you wanted to get through the details of the urban renewal plan that kind of lays out projects that funding is intended for, you can click on the urban renewal plan, it'll bring that up. Has the map of the geographical area. I also try to have available, if it gets brought up, it's like slow there. So the West Salem urban renewal area. So it has it highlighted here on our GIS. So if we needed to look at something in particular, we can zoom in, pick things and go through it that way. I try to have that available at all these meetings so that if something comes up, you want to reference it, I can have a visual representation of what that is. Because sometimes if you're viewing it as a public, or if you are, there are people on the board from West Salem, but there are some that are representing downtown or Salem at large interests, not as familiar with West Salem. So it's helpful to be able to either get on ArcGIS or do a stream. But it is geographically specific. We have grant programs in West Salem and elsewhere, and very active right now. There's a lot of inquiries where it's like maybe in West Salem, but it's not in the area. So it's hard for me, it's very geographically specific. So if you're just, we've had some instances where projects just outside of the boundary. So we can do, we have amended boundaries to include certain areas, but there's the threshold. You can only change that area without it being a major amendment to the plan with a 1% change. You know, most cases we've already done all that stuff. In this case, financing is another one. You have a one-time application to the state where you can make the case for inflation. So at the time of the organization, let's say in 2001, there's certain projects lined out and their estimates at the time anticipated costs for whatever that project that was planned for 2025. At the time, engineering estimates would have tried to anticipate what that cost is. And if it's way off, we can make a rationale. We can apply it to the state to say that it's that mark. Or to do a one-time adjustment for inflation increases that maximum indebtedness. We've done that. I think we're talking about doing it here because we're getting to a point of maximum indebtedness. So what that means is you can only, all projects that we do are debt financing. So even if it's not doing like a large bond, we have two shores, meaning I liken it to paying with a credit card and paying it off immediately. It's the same thing. So you still are leveraging that available debt financing and off right away. And it counts against that maximum debt. So anything that's done, grants, projects, is ticking away at that maximum that the standard is.
So it's 2 shores, that's times.
Yeah, it's still on financing. It's just what's available now immediately without having to go basically like a loan. They apply for a bigger debt financing. So the information as far as we try to keep it up with the page. This is 2023, so we should probably refresh it. We get that information from the assessor, both what value has been added to the district with the projects of investment, as well as where we're. So the plan, and then as far as the advisory board, so that's on here too. So that really quickly. That page also has, if you wanted to help direct maybe a business or someone who will qualify for the grant, there's a link on there for incentives where you can share that link. It's an online application. I would suggest always reach out to me because I can help them navigate that. Sometimes there's a lot of material that's required. We want to make sure that's clear and how to upload it so that when they submit, they're as complete as possible because it's hard. I hate having to go back and forth. We still need this. It'd be nice to have it just done so that we can get it through the process quicker rather than spend another month back to make sure that we have it. So if you know anyone that might be applying for a grant, just have them reach out to me in that process. So as far as the West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board, so there's a link there that takes you to what roles are, the bylaws, and basically what this gets into. I won't do it all here. I just talked about what your role is. It's advisory to the renewal agency, the city council. You watch city council live stream on YouTube. You'll see them on at least twice a month, sometimes once a month, depending on what the agendas look like. They usually start with the housing authority, so they'll gavel in and out as housing authority members, and they'll go there. In fact, that's when David's our new member. So in the last meeting, when they gavelled into the urban, there were some things tied to downtown, and that was David's application for one. That's what we got through. So, and usually a lot of that time, because they have so much to do on council, which is usually the last meeting we get to. Sometimes they'll pull a report to speak to something on a renewal, but with the amount of things happening in city council lately, they usually do set agenda, and it's all rolled into one thing. I'll vote on it, do minutes and everything, and then vote for the meeting. Next thing. That's what happened with the last time. Any questions as far as where you get information, or what the role is, or a renewal? Just wanted to, since we're starting a new year, make sure it's where to find it.
And just a comment, especially for those that are watching, is the grant piece. A lot of small businesses are still not aware that there is that response out there. So just like that we're getting the word out as a board, I think.
Yeah. I would say that might be a good conversation to have, maybe in one of the next meetings. We have grants elsewhere that are a little bit more flexible. Let's say that we were doing a lot when it changed. The initial program is a lot of facade stuff, and facade work makes sense when you have like a downtown, when it's historic, because you have historic buildings you're trying to get refreshed. West Salem, it's a little different, so the facade piece didn't really need it. West Salem's more transitionary, where we've seen a lot of industrial things shift to like mixed use. We're seeing a lot of buildings, the old buildings from like before like the 60s, food processors that are either converting to new uses or getting demolished. So we try to anticipate that and get ahead of it with helping with zone changes. So continued use can still happen if you're doing industrial, but if you want to do something completely different, now it's mixed use. And then we try to anticipate with like a grant program up to 300,000 to help with redevelopment. Well, these redevelopment projects take a long time. So there might be an opportunity to say, how can we help with smaller things rather than a whole like build out of a building or something like that. Because it is taking longer to get that out because those projects are so much more complicated. So that's just something that we can talk about in the future meeting, see how we can make that a little bit more accessible. So like you were saying, as far as familiarity with the grant program, but also how it could help maybe smaller businesses, so it's not like a big either equipment purchase or building expansion or something. So that's all that I had. Let's see on that question.
Are we gonna get the budgets? Out of the document for the next meeting, just so you know, for startup. But
Yeah.
That's how I feel, well, not to see folks now.
Yeah, I'll bring that up. That's good. So we'll get, typically, it's the new fiscal year, so we have all new budgets. So what you guys did, recommendation, went through the budget committee, and so I'll bring it up. It should be basically what you recommended. I don't recall anything changing, so it should be whatever priorities or how you wanted the money, recommendation to basically, original agency, city budget committee. Went through that whole process, and they adopted it. So as we get into fall and winter months, typically around maybe November, budget discussions start to happen. So we'll start kind of high level. Maybe October might be a good, like with their ideas on grant program to make that a little bit more accessible. Maybe that's an October discussion, and then can be ready for some kind of high level like prep for recommendation. It's ultimately, we try to have recommendations shored up as we start the new year, so in January. So you basically have November, January typically, depending on when it lands, it's close to the first, that could get canceled. So you really want to make sure that's ready for February. So if that's where November, December kind of critical budgeted discussions. Because by the time we get back, if we do skip January, February, March ultimately is when everything has to be ready to start the budget committee process. So this part, as far as a recommendation, has to be ready to go and consider it. So as we hit November, we'll have a lot of project and financing discussions. Let's see. I'll share this story.
This website, serial. Zero.
So as far as getting to the budget, you can either type it again in search, or you can go to government and you can go to budget, finance. So as you go down, it should say I don't think they have it as actual, so it's still it's proposed. Eventually, this will be adopted, which it is the adopted, it just hasn't dated yet. So, this is where it is. So, okay. A lot of things on Salem background. So as you get to the main budget page, it starts with, again, the geographical area. It's into like financing breakdown, where the funds are coming from, then like projects. This is where, so we don't really have anything that's worked against this yet. So as far as what's been recommended, as far as total project, all this is what there is, just started. So as far as Musgrave Avenue, Industry Road, Bridge Path, that is that connection piece we were talking about. It's our parkway to the industry. I'll probably share, I'm hoping to have status update on that. I'll share that. But that's a project that's active. So the redevelopment grant program, there's 1.6 million. That's what we are just referencing. We could do more to help get those funds out the door to other businesses. So we'll talk about that. And then everything else is in future projects. Yeah.
Actually, a few things. On the 13th of August, which was next Wednesday, I believe. At 8 a.m., Harvest Music on Edgewater. There's a new business, Ron bought it, used to be located out at Marshall. We're having, he's hosting, so 8 o'clock to about 9, there'll be coffee and some snacks, and he'll kind of explain where he came from and why he got Harvest Music. It's a really cool place. I don't know if you guys had an opportunity to stop. It's pretty cool. But he's doing really well. He was surprised at his opening. Yeah, really well.
It's from 8 to 9 on the 13th.
You have it. West Side newspaper, you guys remember West Side newspaper? Hey, there's a new purchaser, or someone purchased it. And so he's coming to our next board meeting just to talk about that and how we partner, can bring that back to life. So, board meeting next Wednesday again, and that's at 3 o'clock at Red Hawk Winery. On the 28th of August, we have our members meeting, and that's gonna be at Red Hawk Winery. So he's hosting from like 3 to however long you folks want to stay. So he'll be talking about wine and the winemaking process, and he's got a pretty extensive background in that arena. So Aaron Bell will be speaking again, 20th of August, last Thursday of the month, 3 o'clock. West Salem Neighborhood Association did not have a meeting last month. Tonight at 6:30 at Robson, West Salem is their August, if you folks want to join.
So.
6:30
Is that Ross? I thought they were doing it Ross.
Yeah.
I'm glad they went back.
Thursdays. So.
It's not till midnight, I was kidding. It's probably until like 9, 7.
6 or 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely goes till 8 sometimes.
Used to go. So that's all I have.
So, whereas, next meeting topics,
Didn't we suggest?
of the grants. I'm not seeing it. So, we get into, we already had ODOT kind of then spoke about projects in the areas, whereas the side of the bridge project has been. Oh yeah, there you go. As we get going, we'll have all kinds of insurance, probably that's. Thank you. That's always good first. I have it up, but I have too many things over. So, yeah, so September. At least we had them out last year. The group wants to do them again as far as the police department. Getting into the winter months, I think it's nice to hear what's happening as far as downtown and West Salem, both are impacted with security, homelessness. So it's nice to hear from those groups to see like businesses, how they're doing. I know that I was just in Wall Spring Park, it's been cleaned up a lot. I think there's still some camping that happens to the north, but as far as like the city park itself, we can't do that anymore. But I know that they're actively trying to prohibit that. So if you do see, I did see start of the summer, some tenting happening east of the Salem tent awning, like the storage facility. There were a few in there. I think people have been pretty active to report that and get it cleaned up. We have a development site across the street here in downtown, and occasionally they'll start to accumulate in the alleyway. So we do the same thing, reported, cleared out. One area that is always problematic is in West Salem and down here is under the overpasses and bridges. That's ODOT, so they're quarterly, I think they're aware, so they'll hunker down for a few months and get dispersed. Just happen. So happy happy to reach out to the police department, get an update from them if you want to hear from them. We also hear, last time, parks representatives to see like how things are going in Wall Spring Park and elsewhere, at West Salem Park, and what efforts are being made to deter that type of activity. So if that's something you want to hear about, happy to reach out to them. And then in October, we can talk about, like bringing in full county commissioners. It's one of those where West Salem general unique is where bringing a poll. So it's good to hear full county representation and see what they thought about as they start deliberations of where they are actively in their county role with respect to West Salem. They'll have them out in October, and you can start budget discussions, grants in October too.
Would you have an interest to bring Valerie Schwan? Then, she's the full county tax assessor along with the landlords.
Sure.
That would be insightful. Maybe not. You guys-
Assessment.
She's great.
What happened to our funding on Center Street?
I think on Center Street,
On the bridge?
I don't know, I think that with ODOT, is that where? Yeah, I think we've been actively, I've been involved for downtown West Salem, but we've been doing what we can to get parking situated for when it's coming. I think the land use is going through. I think it. Center Street. You heard anything different?
Only what comes out of Portland, which is not specific to our situation. And all that projects ramping on were priorities and he funded the others.
So I haven't heard anything, I have a meeting scheduled, and my understanding of it, everything's, I haven't seen any some processes that. They're now pushing that out. Still. That's the last I heard.
I'm just really excited for the new leadership body. These guys.
Hey, to the next level. Let's
That's
go.
right.
Next meeting, September 3rd.
Oh, next meeting, okay, yeah, next meeting, September 3rd. We introduce, I guess,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I didn't know if it was good the last.
Yeah, no, David's new.
Oh,
So first meeting.
Yeah, first meeting.
do you want background?
Yeah.
I started at the beginning.
Yeah.
Good morning, I've been in Salem 8 years. I lived in Kaiser Road in Eugene. Currently working for ZAC, Northwest Property Management Group and Northwest Property Specialists. I live on 7th Street. And I got interested in certain.
Let's have someone living in it's always hard to find, like, we reached out to a lot of different residents in the original area. So, welcome. Yeah, have someone.
Yeah, that was a fantastic input.
Thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many seats are?
Two. They're each of us, so they're like one's at large, I think, like. Or it might be business representation, yeah, so we had the Baxter's changes. So we have the business representation at large. At large is pretty easy, so it could be like create property or resident. Same.
All right. All discussion? Adjourned?
All right.